Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. I'm really excited to be here. And I've got my glasses on so I can see my slides. So this is definitely going to be good, I hope. Hello. My name is Hannah Smith. I previously worked at both Distilled and Verve Search on teams that collectively secured more than 22,000 pieces of linked coverage on sites like this. Ooh. But I'm not here to talk about PR campaigns today. Bit of a change of pace. Instead, I'm going to be talking about managing people. We'll see how this goes, right? So, to give you a bit of background, I joined Verve as head of creative in August 2016, and prior to that, I was in an individual contributor role at an agency called Distilled. So, individual contributors don't manage humans, and it's lovely. It's really lovely, just being responsible for yourself. But I did have previous management experience. I had previously managed teams of people, both at Distilled and elsewhere. But nevertheless, I was really nervous about stepping back into a management role. I felt like I'd made a lot of mistakes in the past, and I really wanted to get it right this time. For clarity, I wanted to get it right all the times before as well, but I was just like, this time, this is going to be the one when, I'm going to finally get my head around this management thing. So, before I joined Verve, I kind of wanted to be a bit more intentional about this stuff, because I'd managed people before, but my management style, if you could even call it a management style, really was like all over the shop. Like I wasn't sure what kind of manager I was trying to be. I felt that there were a lot of people telling me the sort of manager or leader that I ought to be, and it never really squared with me, and I think consequently, I was just kind of messy. I was like one of these messy managers, and I was like, I don't want to be that anymore. So I decided to make a list of the qualities that I wanted to embody as a manager. And I've never shared this publicly before, and now I feel naked. So here is my list. I'm going to dig into them a little bit more in a minute, but you can see, hopefully, you think she sounds great. And she does sound great. I wasn't always able to be all of those things all of the time, right? I can't claim to have been all of those things all of the time. But this list was really, really useful, even though it existed only for me. Because whenever I was encountering a problem, I was able to look back at my list and kind of ask myself, how do I deal with this in a way that allows me to stay true to my values and stay true to the sort of manager that I really want to be, as opposed to the manager that people are telling me I need to be. So, yeah, there we go. Couple of things to note here. Most of these qualities come reasonably naturally to me because they're aligned with my own personal values. So it's reasonably easy for me to embody most of this stuff. So what does elevates people? Elevates people, what does that mean? It means like develop people, help them grow, help them progress. And that's something that I'm genuinely really passionate about, I'm really excited about. So like that's just a good thing and I want to be that. So that's kind of easy for me. I believe in clarity of communication. I don't shy away from difficult conversations. Even the digital PR panel earlier didn't shy away from difficult conversations there. I'm reasonably open to criticism, and I'm reasonably intentionally fair and honest. These things, I would categorize these as behavior stretches, right? And I think it's good to have behavior stretches, as long as like your whole list isn't a behavior stretch. If your whole list was a behavior stretch, then you're just trying to be something that you're not, right? Consistent, cool-headed, and measured. I am not always as consistent, cool-headed, or measured as I'd really like to be. But these are good things to shoot for, right? Like these are good things to kind of remind myself, like this is what I want to be. This is how I want to arrive in my work, and this is how I want to be there for my team. So, I also want you to notice what's not there. Dynamic, inspirational, visionary, or optimistic. I showed my dad these slides, and he's like, babe, take the optimistic thing off. Like, just let people believe you're optimistic. I'm not. I am not optimistic. I think it's a superpower, honestly, because whenever any course of action, I can tell you all of the things that could possibly go wrong, and optimists can't, right? But I can't pretend to be optimistic when I'm not. I don't think I need to be these things, right? When I try and be these things, what happens is something called incongruence. So when you try and be a thing, or try and embody a value that you don't hold, what happens is what you're portraying outwardly does not match what you're feeling inwardly. And people notice. So they don't notice. So they don't go like, oh, Hannah, you're being incongruent, because nobody said that ever in their lives. They'll just think you're being weird, you're being odd. They might think, I don't trust her. There's something not right there. So, So I'm none of these things. I think that's fine. I'm not going to try and embody these things. On the topic of incongruence, incongruence is a massive problem, right? And I would really, if you take nothing away but this, don't try to embody a value or quality which isn't true to you, right? Because you'll struggle to keep up the act. You won't be able to keep up the act. It'll go wrong in some place. It will discomfort your team. They won't feel like they can trust you because they're not sure what head you've got on that day, essentially, right? Because one day you'll be behaving in one way, and then another day you'll be behaving in another way, and it'll be awful. So ultimately, it'll make you unhappy, it'll make your team unhappy. Please don't do it. Or don't feel like you need to do it, actually, is what I'm saying. There's a lot of pressure, I think. So, today's talk's in two parts: management myths and mistakes and toxic traits. So let's talk about some management myths. So as I said before, these lists of qualities do not appear on my list. I'm not these things, I think that's fine. But some of you might be thinking, don't remarkable leaders or really good managers, don't they need to be these things? And I'm not convinced that they do. So I want to talk about some of these XX qualities of remarkable leaders articles which pollute the internet. It has got ridiculous. I feel like we started out with like 5 qualities of remarkable leaders. Now there's 12. The biggest number I've seen is like 48. 48 qualities of remarkable leaders. I hate these articles. And I'm going to explain why. I'm picking on Tony Robbins because he is big enough and ugly enough to take it. So here is an example of a pollutant of the internet. He won't see this, it'll be fine. This is the type of article I'm talking about. 10 leadership qualities of remarkable leaders. So these are the qualities that remarkable leaders embody according to Tony Robbins. This is just his opinion. Very little EEAT here. That's a little joke for the SEOs. It wasn't very good. Don't laugh, it's terrible. Okay, let's get into this. So, actually, I'm fine with some of it. Like, it's not all terrible, right? Effective and influential communication. I'm all right with that. Authentic and congruent. I think that's really important. I just talked about how important I think authenticity and congruence are. So that's cool. I'm fine with that. Committed yet flexible is oxymoronic, but I sort of get what you mean. Tony. Ability to connect and break patterns. This is poorly worded from Tony. What he means here is the ability to connect with people, and by break patterns, I believe he is referring to some sort of problem-solving skills. I'm fine with that. All of these things are fine. Tony Robinson. So, the problem is there's a lot of main character energy here, right? Which I'm just not okay with. So we've got compelling vision and brilliant strategist, right? Now this is a top-down leadership approach, and this is not my jam, right? This is not how I like to work. This is all about the leader having this vision and building this strategy and just persuading all the other people that work for them just to follow. Don't question, just follow. And it's just not the way I like to work. That would not work for me, and I don't think you need to work like that to be a remarkable leader, Tony Robinson. Robbins. Then there's this stuff, which is honestly just worrying, right? So we have extraordinary hunger, that's just being obsessive, isn't it? That's not good. Has anybody worked for an obsessive boss? Yeah, was it good? No, babe, it wasn't. It was awful. Absolute certainty. That is just delusion, my friends. That's just actively delusional. And I actually think the opposite is more important, right? I think really great managers are good at navigating uncertainty. Good managers are comfortable with ambiguity. They're able to find the way. The people who operate on the basis that they are absolutely certain that the way they are going to do things is the right way, they have blinkers on, right? They're just not listening to anyone else. So no to the delusional. And then finally, unreasonable expectations and standards. This is just perfectionism, right? That's all that is, perfectionism. I am a recovering perfectionist. I have unreasonably high expectations and standards for myself. That is a problem. That is not a good thing. It is bad enough to have those for yourself. To inflict that upon your team, oh dear, no, Tony, wrong. So, does obsessive delusional perfectionism remind you of anyone? Reminds me of someone. This giant douchebag. Right, we don't need him. There's one of him on the planet. That's more than enough, isn't it? Really. I can't wait till he leaves Earth. So, from my perspective, all of this stuff can get in the bin. It can just get in the bin. It's nonsense. I think really, reading articles and books about management is great, but I think believing everything you read really, really isn't. I would encourage you to consider which management myths you've unconsciously absorbed. So if there are a bunch of traits that someone's told you need to exhibit, or a whole bunch of qualities that someone else has told you need to embody, actually just stop and ask yourself, wait, is that trait even really desirable? Is that what I want to be? Part 2. I don't know why I'm whispering. Mistakes and toxic traits, or the trouble with binary thinking. Please raise your hand if you've ever had a bad manager. I'm sorry. Oh, God, it's all of you. Oh, God. I've not done this talk before, so Ooh, there we go. Okay. What do we mean by bad manager, though? So, I think that bad managers come in 2 flavors, right? We have toxic managers. Toxic managers display behaviors like aggression, bullying, dishonesty, harassment, manipulation, and narcissism, and probably a whole bunch more. And then we have accidental assholes. Now, accidental assholes don't display overtly toxic behaviors. They're just, not great at their jobs. Do you know what I mean? They're difficult to deal with too, because they're just not great at their jobs, right? They're not great at supporting their teams, but they are different. These 2 flavors are different. Now, toxic managers are beyond awful, and I'm not going to be focusing on those today. I am going to be focusing on accidental assholes, and there's a good reason for that, and it's because I was one. So let's talk about it. So I've been thinking a lot about how I came to be an accidental asshole. Why did this happen? And I have some theories. So I think it's because I'd had accidental asshole managers in the past. Actually, while we're here, who's had an accidental asshole manager in the past? Mostly. Okay, right. They are really useful in some directions, right? Because you're I'm not going to be like him, I'd say, or her, but it's normally him. Oh, that's so rude. Sorry, I didn't say that. Cut that from the video. That's terrible. But like that's the one useful thing about a bad manager, right? You have a bad manager and you're like, I'm not going to do that. I'm definitely not going to be that person. So because I'd had some accidental arseholes in my past, I had a reasonably clear idea of the sort of manager I definitely didn't want to be. So let's give you an example. I really hate being micromanaged. I hate it more than anything else. And so I promised that I would never do that to my team. But, oh dear. I also hate those managers who brag about their team having total autonomy, right? It sounds great until you realize that what this manager is doing is just totally derelict, like just dereliction of duty is what they're doing. They're like, my team have total autonomy to work however they want. And what they actually mean is they're in the pub or they're brown-nosing someone else rather than actually helping their team navigate and solve problems, right? And they're like, total autonomy, I'm so good, right? So I didn't want to be one of those managers either. I did not want to be a total autonomy arsehole. And yet, I became an accidental autonomy arsehole. And I think it's because of this, right? At various points, I failed to offer appropriate levels of guidance and support. Like, at various points, I became the thing I hated, right? I left my people flailing, which is awful, right? Absolutely awful. And to make matters worse, the whole time I was busily patting myself on the back for not being one of those awful micromanagers. I was like, go, well done, Hannah. You are not a micromanager. You're just an arsehole. Great. But it turns out that I'm not alone in this, right? Actually, I've observed lots of managers slipping into behaviors like authoritarianism, micromanagement, being totally task-oriented, or they go like the other way. They go too far in the other direction. Democracy at any cost. We're just going to put everything to a vote. Doesn't matter what it is. I will make no decisions because I am a democratic leader. That's not what democracy means, my love. Failing to manage anything or anyone, being totally people-oriented, right? This happens, even though I suspect the managers in question, like, they didn't want to be that, right? Like, that wasn't what they set out to be. They just sort of wound up there. And I think part of the problem is we have a tendency to run too far away from the things that we don't want to be. So we'll have this really clear idea in our head. We're like, I will never be a micromanager. I will never be one of those awful people who does that to my team. And so we just run too far away from it, right? And I think it's because of this. We think that if micromanagement is bad, so therefore, total autonomy is good. But actually, this is a false binary, right? This isn't true. This, I think, is closer to the truth. Come on, clicker, don't fail me now. This is closer to the truth, right? Micromanagement leaves people feeling disempowered and frustrated, and total autonomy leaves people feeling lost and unsupported. Neither are good, right? It's not like bad good. It's like bad, bad. Or at best, not good, not good. So I think it can be useful to view these types of behaviors on a spectrum rather than viewing them as good and bad. So here is my spectrum. We've got micromanagement at one end and total autonomy at the other. Neither end of the spectrum is good. Ideally, we want to land somewhere in the middle. And the reason we want to land somewhere in the middle is because most people hate being micromanaged, but appreciate and actually need guidance, structure, and support. And actually, 100% autonomy can feel like abandonment. And we don't want that. Even the people who say, I like autonomy in my work, like I value being able to do my work my way, even those people will still need some structure, guidance, and support. So, where you land probably depends on your team, and actually you might land in different places for different members of your team, right? Because the team are a collective, but they don't necessarily all think and feel the same. Look at another example. Again, neither end of the spectrum here is good. We've got authoritarianism versus democracy, and again, we want to land somewhere in the middle, because no one wants to work for a dictator. But I think you need to ask yourself, are you being democratic, or are you just avoiding making tough decisions, right? And that's not okay. That's not okay. Like, it is your job as a manager to make those tough decisions and to make them yourself and to take responsibility for those decisions. And actually, when you put everything to a vote, what you're doing again is like abdicating responsibility, because then it's not your fault, is it? It's the team's fault. They voted for it. No, that's not okay. That's not cool. So an example I like to give for PR folks is, for example, voting on which PR campaign to either pitch to a client or to actually make if you're working in-house. Like, that might sound fair, right? And I would argue, yeah, that's the fairest way to decide which PR campaigns you make. But it doesn't mean that you'll reach the right decisions, because not everyone on the team has the same level of knowledge and experience, right? It can't just be one person, one vote. Like, that's not okay. And again, ultimately, certainly when I was head of creative at Verve, like, I was ultimately responsible for all of the PR campaigns we created and all of the results we did and did not achieve, right? It would have been very unfair of me to go like, well, it was the team's fault, they voted for that campaign. Like, that's not okay. That's not okay. So yeah, again, we need to ideally land somewhere in the middle. Incidentally, I think deciding things as a team in some contexts is great, but there are just some things that, not everything goes to a vote. One more. Task-oriented versus people-oriented. Again, ideally we want to land in the middle, because neither end of the spectrum is good. Being too task-oriented means the work produced is great, but the team are in tatters. Not good. But when a manager is too intent on ensuring that everyone's happy, the quality of the work suffers, and then mediocrity reigns. And actually, in my experience, most people aren't happy when they are producing mediocre work. Like, happiness comes in a bunch of different directions. We are fulfilled by a bunch of different things. One of them is creating good work hopefully in an environment that respects you as an individual and, shows due care, love, and attention for you and values you. But yeah, said enough on that, haven't I? I'm ranting again a bit here. Many of the articles written on the topic of management lack nuance. So behaviors or traits are labeled as bad, and for some behaviors, that is absolutely correct, right? Aggression, bullying, dishonesty, harassment, manipulation, narcissism, right? Those aren't just bad, they are actively toxic. No defense there. The trouble is that I think those same articles often present false binaries. So they'll say micromanagement is bad, but total autonomy is good. And I don't agree with that. I think it's unhelpful for us to be thinking in this like bad, good binary, right? I think if we want to be good managers, ultimately we need to be aware of both the behaviors we're running from and the behaviors we're running towards. And rather than running from like one extreme to the next, actually we need to be aware of our feelings about particular aspects of management and indeed how those feelings might impact our behavior. So how does this look for me, right? I know I hate to be micromanaged, and I fear accidentally becoming the thing I hate. What this means is I'm likely to swing too far in the opposite direction. So I'd sooner offer no guidance and support or help than find myself accidentally micromanaging people. So this is useful for me to know, right? Because it means I can check in with myself and I can also check in with my team. So I can literally ask, like, am I offering you reasonable levels of autonomy, or have I just abandoned you here? Do you need me, right? So I can check in with myself. How do I think I'm doing? And also check in with individuals on the team so they can tell me how I'm doing, which is also important, right? So, very, very, very quick recap. I really would encourage you to determine your own management style. Identify your own values and qualities. Use them to help define the sort of manager you want to be. Write yourself a list. Keep it just for you if you want. Revisit and revise that list if you need to, right? But don't try to embody qualities or values you don't hold, particularly when they're like outside forces. I honestly believe that you, right now, exactly as you are, have all the qualities you need to be an amazing manager. If you lean into those qualities. You'll struggle to be a manager if you're kind of like accepting essentially like too much from outside. So accepting too many intrusive thoughts about you need to behave a certain way or be a certain way to be a good manager. You can be a great manager right now just by leaning into the values and qualities that you naturally hold. Your list will be different to mine, and that's cool. I love it if you are dynamic. I don't know what that means, though, genuinely. Please notice which management myths you've unconsciously absorbed. Ultimately, we need fewer Elon Musks on the planet, not more. By Elon. Try to avoid being an accidental arsehole. Beware of false binaries. Consider not just the behaviors you're running from, but also the ones you're running towards. And check yourself, or ideally get your team to check in with you. I don't think it's possible to never be an accidental arsehole. I do think it's possible to be less of one, though. So just shoot for that. That's okay. Thank you to everyone who's ever worked with me. There's a couple in here. Sorry, I was an arsehole. And thank you all for listening to me.